great debate. I've got to say this one's been bugging me a little bit. So last year we have Aaron Rodgers and new contract, $35 million, upwards of 18% of the cap. Now Russell Wilson in the same territory. I don't think anybody's going to argue these guys are worth whatever it is they're going to get paid. But at the same time, if they were paid $100 million, we would say that's stupid, right? There's some tipping point that you go, this is stupid. Are we now to that tipping point? As great as those two players are, is $35 million too much? Because typically the Super Bowl winner has been around 12 to 13% of the cap at most. Now we're at 18% of the cap. Can you build enough of a football team around those two guys to still win it?
I mean, intuitively, I think I've been saying top 8, top 9 type of quarterback. There's a certain number of guys I think are probably more valuable than the rest. The thing I get scared about is the QB middle class. When you see the Derek Carrs, the Matthew Staffords, Dak Prescott's up now. I think those guys are more of a debate. So, I don't know what you guys have found as far as actually breaking it down, but I still feel like those elite quarterbacks are worth it.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is it has to be a percentage of the cap or the percentage of the spending. So Wilson this year is still sort of on the low end, right? His deal doesn't kick in for a little bit later. The cap is continuing to go up. So over time, that contract becomes less and less of a burden as a percentage of the cap. And so, once he sort of settles in there, the team sort of gets better at building around him. But I agree with Steve. It's totally this top 8, right? Any guys that are above maybe 2.25 wins above replacement, below that, then you're starting to sort of see the guys, pretty much struggle. Almost all those guys are underneath the, is this team successful? Is this team not successful? And it's the exact guys you think about. It's the Lucks, the Rivers, the Roethlisbergers, the Bradys. Those types of players. Wilson is certainly in that category. So I think as much as the sticker price really shocks us, I think you do have to buy into a player like that, especially one that we've seen have success despite Seattle putting poor circumstances around him at times.
But you've got, last year it's Patrick Mahomes. He's on the rookie deal. We saw Russell Wilson and Colin Kaepernick and go down the list, right? Jared Goff last year. Is it enough of a factor now, if you're the GM, that you have to begin to think at this point, $35 million for a great player or a rookie contract for 5 years effectively if they're drafted in the first round, and I can go buy the rest of the team? In other words, clearly nobody knew Patrick Mahomes was going to be Patrick Mahomes, or they'd have given away their entire draft for 3 years to go get him. Drafted, 10th, 11th, something like that. So are we at the point now that the rookie contract is every bit as valuable as some of these top-end quarterbacks?
Well, it is, but Eric brings up a really good point, which is what's most important is that your quarterback is great. So it's not just, no matter what, I have to have a guy on a rookie contract. I have to be able to discern when a guy is valuable enough that I know I'm going to keep him. If not, I'm going to churn and burn, right? What you can't end up in is that nowhere middle land where you've got some guy that I've had him for 5 years. He's been okay. He's had a couple of really great games. My fan base really likes him, and now I'm going all in. Because that's when you're in a situation where that quarterback is not good enough to elevate the rest of his supporting cast. Whereas a Russell Wilson clearly is, a Patrick Mahomes clearly is, so you'll invest in him later.
So you're talking about the Jared Goffs, the Dak Prescotts. Are you going to pay them the 35 or more? Goodness only knows where the upside of this thing is.
Right, there's 2 projections to be made. There's a projection as in, is this first-round quarterback going to be as good as Stafford, Dalton, Tannehill, those types of those types of players? Because you can win if that answer is yes, and you have a rookie deal. The second projection is this Derek Carr, is this Andy Dalton, is this Matthew Stafford the next top 8 quarterback? Because the answer to can you win with that type of player is yes, right? Rivers was in the Final Four of the AFC, right? So was Luck, right? So was Brady. It was Mahomes that ended up winning the game against Luck that puts him in that conversation, and then he wins MVP. But those are the 2 types of quarterbacks that are successful. The rookie deal guys that their bar is lower, And then the veteran deal guys, their bar is higher, and you have to make two projections.
All right. So here's the question: is the middle class dead now for quarterbacks? Because I get the top end guys, the Wilson and Rodgers, you can justify that. But if you're in that middle class of quarterbacks now, because the rookie wage scale is so cheap, that why in the world am I going to have one of these middle class quarterbacks when I should definitely then at that point go for a rookie?
Well, it should be.
Yeah, it should be.
Right? The problem is that it's not, because the value of the quarterback is so immense. People are reaching, right? They're saying, look, Kirk Cousins, I don't have a great amount of evidence that this guy is a top 8 quarterback, but I so desperately want him to be that I'm going to pay him like he is. And so that middle class isn't dead. It's just been escalated into this upper tier that they're not worth. So there should be a place for them, just not at the amount that they're getting paid.
And you pay such a premium for the known quantity, right? When the Vikings were coming off of 2017, there was uncertainty about Keenum. Could he continue this? Because we have this great defense and we have a decent run and we have great wide receivers and everything. But what they did is they paid the premium for Cousins, his known quantity. But then when everything around them goes down, the defense goes from first overall to like 5th. Special teams struggle. The receivers kind of, tail off at the season end.
Yeah, but you pay your quarterback, and then some of that goes away. We've already seen it with Seattle, with Frank Clark now having to be traded because you paid Russell Wilson.
But Russell Wilson is so much better than Kirk Cousins that it overcomes that, right? And we know that the difference.
We don't know that. We haven't seen these guys win a Super Bowl yet at 18% of the cap.
But Wilson, a season ago, the Seahawks they essentially made the worst decisions on second down. Their defense was like lower third in the league in terms of like all of our metrics, and they still went 10-6 because he's one of those quarterbacks that's capable of making Tyler Lockett into a class name, right? And he's capable. Kirk and the Matthew Staffords of the world, I think, demonstrated that they're not.
I think we have to be dangerous not to just focus on the Super Bowl, which obviously is the ultimate goal, but there's one winner every year. So now, over the last 8 years, we have a sample size of 8, 3 of which are the Patriots.
And you've got Tom Brady, who's playing at half price. Tom Brady, if there's a $40 million quarterback, he probably would be that, but he's been playing at a half price contract.
That's a big factor. I'm just saying, if we're using the numbers, Atlanta is a 25-point lead, blown lead away from blowing up all these numbers because Matt Ryan was really expensive in 2016. Last year, Drew Brees was really expensive with the Saints. We're a blown pass interference call from him being in the Super Bowl against Brady with just as good a shot. So we're literally a handful of plays away from, over the last X number of Super Bowls, this has happened, those numbers completely being blown up. I think ultimately it's giving yourself the best chance to succeed every year, but giving your best chance to win 10, to win 11, to get into the tournament, so to speak, and then anything can
The Saints are a classic example of why you still have to consider the elite quarterback, because they went 7-9 for 3 consecutive years because their defense was so poor. They have one, whether you call it a good draft class or a lucky draft class, right? You draft all those players in 2017, and now all of a sudden you're in the mix because you have the brilliant quarterback with cheap talent on defense. Michael Thomas emerges as a number 1 receiver, and now all of a sudden it makes sense to have Brees on that big contract. When you have some unlucky drafts, that's how you get those strings of 7-9. We've seen the Falcons the last 2 years struggle because Ryan's great, but not, but that team has struggled around him with injuries and things like that.
What I think is lost in all of this is how important it is to say, how confident am I that this quarterback is a great quarterback? So what is the measuring? We have the luxury of having graded every player on every play. We have the luxury of having elite mathematicians developing a WAR metric that gives us a much clearer picture of how valuable a quarterback
Wins above replacement.
Wins above replacement than touchdowns and interceptions. People get lost in that number, and that's how a guy like Kirk Cousins, a guy like Matt Stafford, a guy like Derek Carr end up getting paid far more than they should be and getting overvalued. So when we look at, and Eric wrote this incredible article looking at quarterback salary as a percentage of the cap and how it relates to team wins, you can't make a case that your team is actually worse off by paying your quarterback more. And as you dig deeper into it, you start to see these things pull apart. And the real issue being teams are just not able to value quarterbacks correctly.
So that's, I think, the best part of what we're doing here, right? Because we've had the grades for a number of years. And intuitively, I'm looking at it saying, it feels like there's 8 to 10, right? There's these guys that are separate where if you give Rodgers a lesser supporting cast, or you give Brady or Brees a lesser supporting cast in a given year, they're still going to get you there for the most part, right? Obviously, they'd rather have better playmakers, but they can carry a team. There's 8 to 10. Then you guys started to put value to it and essentially back that up. The danger zone is the Andy Dalton zone, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, and all that stuff, where you can point to good seasons, but you also point to I always go back to the Andy Dalton 2015 season where he had a perfect cast of playmakers. Tyler Eifert's healthy the whole season. A.J. Green, Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu. Those mid-tier quarterbacks, if you give them the perfect ecosystem, can succeed, but you have to be able to isolate those two things, and that's where I think it's really risky. So I think what I was hearing from you guys, the way the Wilson deal's structured, if you could push the big numbers further along because you have confidence in him being a top 8 guy, then you're giving yourself more cap space year to year, right? But if I'm going to pay Cousins or I'm going to pay Dalton or I'm going to pay Derek Carr, I want an out just in case I'm picking top 10 and there's a Dwayne Haskins involved. Because Derek Carr to Dwayne Haskins, the difference might be this, but the price is this. Right? So I kind of want an out on some of those mid-tier quarterbacks.
Yeah, and some of the other things that don't cost money, or they cost money for teams, but they don't cost against the cap, are things like brilliant head coaches. And we're starting to see that in the NFL where all the good offensive minds are now becoming the head coaches, which is going to keep them from getting purged from these teams, right? When McVay is an offensive coordinator in Washington, he's easily going to get promoted. But now he's got the top job in LA, so he's not going to go anywhere if he continues to be great. And what we've seen is with the teams that somehow overcome the drastic spending, the 20% of spending, Indianapolis last year, Frank Reich, great play caller. 2016 Atlanta, Kyle Shanahan. But again, he gets promoted to a head coaching job. He's gone, right? And we've seen that the Falcons get perturbed a little bit under Sarkisian the last 2 years. So again, like teams are getting smarter, and like there are going to be edges here, and the edges right now are great coaching, and then either you have a brilliant quarterback and you decide this is the guy to go with, or you churn and burn and look at subsequent look at quarterback classes. I think the next wave is going to be this middle class.
Is it possible that quarterbacks have been undervalued to this point? Because I know your wins above replacement war has shown that a Tom Brady can be 8 wins better than replacement value, which is sort of the top end, right? Is it possible that all these years they've been getting all this money and they've actually been undervalued?
I think if you look at it as a percentage of total team wins, the quarterback should be making a lot more. The only reason they don't make a lot more is due to the cap and is due to, I think anchoring the
just
fact
the top
that
end guys.
Yeah, just the top end guys should be making, as you call Brady a $40 million quarterback. It's probably conservative even if you look at his actual value to the team versus how many wins that they get. I mean, you're talking about half, he's worth a third to a half of the team's win. So why, the only reason he's not worth a third to the half of the team's cap is that he understands that his legacy is winning Super Bowls.
All right, so now you're the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott is up. Now,
And Zeke.
But and don't get you guys started on running back stuff. Oh my God. But it's not a bad point either. Like Saquon Barkley, nobody's going to deny that he's one of the great players at his position in the league, right? But he didn't move the needle for the Giants. So they don't go quarterback and they stay put there and then go running back. And as great as he was, doesn't move the needle. So now Dallas is in the exact same situation. So now what are you going to do? Are you going to pay Dak over Zeke?
I mean, I think you have to make a shrewd valuation of where Dak is at. And this is where I think what we've talked about comes full circle, right? Do you go to the table and you think you're negotiating with Dak Prescott, future top 5 quarterback? Because there's not a whole lot of evidence that that's going to be the case. So the problem is if you don't value him appropriately and we don't have him as a top 5, top 10 guy, we go to the table and we say, look, we don't think you're a top 10 guy. However, if we want to continue this relationship, here's the data that backs up how we can win. Because look, Dak is a winner, and everything that we've heard is that he wants to do what is right for the team. He is a team player. So I think that next kind of edge is being able to come to the table with your coach and your quarterback and your GM and have a conversation that's like, let's actually level here.
But you just told me the middle class is dead for quarterbacks. You don't want any middle class quarterback.
Because of how it's been treated. Here's how it's been treated, though. The next guy that's on the open market gets paid. If the next guy's Derek Carr, he becomes the top paid guy, even though he doesn't deserve it. If Cousins is the next guy to the table, he gets paid. It's because the NFL is just paying the next guy that's out there instead of across the board properly assigning value.
People, when they look at risk, hate losing more than they like winning. So the thought of losing Dak to the Dallas Cowboys that hurts more to them in their purview than the benefit of gaining Dak being that. So they look at that and they say, I can't lose a franchise quarterback, more so than they view the opportunity of letting him go and drafting a guy high as the opportunity to gain one.
All right,
it's more about
even though they just
one.
lost a Romo and picked up a Dak, and for a 4-year window, that's really good.
The example that we have to build off of is actually the Brock Osweiler deal with the Denver Broncos, because Brock looked like the next passable that next average quarterback in the NFL. And for all the grief that John Elway gets, he said, look, I'm going to pay you this much, and if you want more, fine, we're gonna move on from you. And because Brock was limited, because Brock, in a perfect circumstance, Brock could have been an average quarterback, and he was for Denver.
But if you're going to have an average
struggles.
quarterback, why wouldn't you trade up and go try? And I know you guys don't like Haskins and you don't like Locke. I probably like him more than you guys do. But for that matter, why not give away everything for Kyler Murray, who you guys all agree probably is going to end up a top 8, top 10 kind of guy?
Yeah, I mean, why not? If you have Goff and a team's willing to trade a first-round pick to you, and you already have a first-round pick, then you're going to have 2, and you have the ammunition to go up and get the quarterback you want in the draft.
I would do that. And I think when you say that the middle class is dead, I think there's an opportunity to actually open it back up and to value quarterbacks correctly. That's the work that we're trying to do. We're trying to say, hey, we can tell you how valuable a quarterback is and how much you should pay him. And that can reopen the opportunity for winning to teams that otherwise would be saddled with quarterbacks that can't actually get
So
them
you're
above
okay
the
with Dak Prescott at $20 million. You're just not okay with him at $30 million.
I'm certainly not okay with him at $30 million. I think
10 to 15 is
I think 20
more
is
than
even
reasonable.
a little high for me, given what we've seen of Dak.
Well, then you're going to lose him.
That's fine. I would lose him.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, though. At some point,
but you're saying you have to make a stand. You have to take a stance at some
Right.
point.
somebody's going to pay him that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And you let somebody else make that decision, because again, teams overestimate how much losing a player like that is going to hurt them versus what gaining a player like Kyler would gain for them. Like it's the endowment effect, right? Like once you have something, you're more afraid to lose it than you are to gain something else.
So now the comparison is Dak at 25 million versus, say, Will Grier at the back end of the first round at rookie contract, or Drew Lock on a rookie contract. You know, is the difference between Dak and the next draftable quarterback that big versus the high-end guys to the mid-tier guys, right? So the point is, I don't think there's a massive drop-off between Dak and the next guy, but financially there is. So you get the next Will Grier, who I think, you evaluate Will Grier and you say, look, everything around him has to be good. Just like QBs 11 through 26 in the NFL,
Yes.
Everything around them has to be good. They're not completely interchangeable, but correct me if I'm wrong, much more interchangeable than the top 8 to 10.
I'll take Drew Lock over Will Grier, but
Well, and that's the thing. That's the great thing. You bring up an awesome point. It's luck. Dak Prescott being a Dallas Cowboy is pure luck. They got him.
They wanted Paxton Lynch instead.
They wanted Paxton Lynch instead. Maybe they wanted Johnny Manziel at one point, right? So you have to have the sunk cost fallacy is at play here too, because it's like we've invested to grow this, gem, this diamond in the rough that we found. We can't possibly throw that all away, and you really have to continue looking forward with this strong anchoring of how good the quarterback
But you did
is.
it once. You found him in the 4th round once, so why not go back to the formula, go back to the rookie contract, eliminate the 25 million or 20 million, whatever it is, and just go, hey, it's our job to find the next guy in our next 5 years we're going to play.
You do that every year. You have to do that every year. So this is what I think needs to, last year's draft class, right? I think one of the biggest mistakes NFL teams, like the Buffalo Bills coming into this year saying, well, we drafted Josh Allen last year, now let's build the team around him, when a part of that strategy needs to be, let me find the next quarterback too. Until Josh Allen proves to me he's in that top 8 to 10, I need to start finding the next guy. Now, once you think you have the top guy and you feel good using our numbers that he's a top 8 to 10 guy, you build like crazy around him. But the Bills should still be in the QB market. The Jets technically should still be in the QB market. The Bears and Mitchell Trubisky and all of those wins should be in the QB market. They should. If the Jaguars were in the QB market a couple years ago, they had this beautiful roster. Let's build around Blake Bortles. Let's draft Leonard Fournette. And they passed on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. If they were in the QB market at all times, because they're like, look, let's be realistic about Blake Bortles. At best, he comes in as a top 15 to 20
They
quarterback.
passed
in
on
one
Lamar
year.
Jackson last year for a defensive tackle.
But isn't the
They should
problem?
always be in the market.
Isn't the inherent
Everybody
problem
should be in the market.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're the Giants, why wouldn't you take Haskins and Locke at 6 and
I
whatever it
agree with
is?
Right.
Now we're talking,
But look at
Chris.
the Patriots. Look at the Patriots during the Brady era. They drafted Ryan Mallett. They drafted Jimmy Garoppolo. They were going after the rumors were they're going after Mayfield. They like Greer. They get it, right? And the thing is if more teams did this, the quarterback draft market would also equilibrate to something more rational. You get more guys in the second and third round because there would be fewer teams saying, I don't have a young quarterback right now. If you had Will Greer that you just picked, right, you're going to be less desperate to move up into the top 10. Like you'd get if teams were more rational, you would get, contracts that were less, staggered towards the high end. You get draft picks that were less staggered towards the high end. You would go back to having more quarterbacks picked
I
in the
just look
second
at
and
this
third.
thing, and this is what I can't get out of my head, is that if you can get a relatively good quarterback for 5 years on a rookie contract, it just seems like that is your chance to go from the bottom where you're picking
Yes.
to the top immediately, because all those Frank Clarks of the world that have to get dumped out into the market, you're the one in the market for them right now.
Yeah.
Right. That's the key thing is you draft a guy high and you get enamored with some glimmer of hope that the guy shows.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you say, no, we can't possibly bring another quarterback into the ecosystem. What the Patriots have done, building a culture of no player is too great ever. You always have to continue to improve, is really what teams need to get to. Because it allows you to do these things that are actually rational without worrying about hurting people's feelings.
It's
right?
a huge point. We had an offensive coordinator in here, former NFL offensive coordinator, saying, and we're always trying to say, look, pass the ball more, right? And he's like, well, I get to call X number of run plays because my offensive line likes it. They like it. They want to fire off the ball. They want to hit somebody. And we were half joking, saying, man, well, if you set the culture early and said, look, I'm going to call the best plays for us to win. You either want to win or you want to go have fun and hit somebody. Like, just call the plays to win. You're paid to protect the guy, right? So the culture part of it's great, and I think we're seeing it right now, right? Just because Arizona picked Josh Rosen last year, if our evaluations say you can make this massive upgrade in Kyler Murray, it's a no-brainer. And whether you can trade Josh Rosen before the draft or not, it's a no-brainer. Worst case scenario, who cares? You get two quarterbacks. At some point, somebody's going to need a
They
Josh
still
Rosen.
have value.
Trade him. Of course.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, how many years did the Green Bay Packers do that? They had like a row of them, and they got great value for it. I just don't understand the whole thought of, I think people are a little bit afraid of drafting quarterbacks and over-drafting quarterbacks, whereas I think the mindset should be until I either get a great rookie on a rookie contract to play quarterback or I get one of those top 8, there's no amount of ammunition that I won't spend to get into that club.
And we found that with our draft trade simulator. It's like if you are moving up for any position but QB, it's a bad play. But if you are moving up for a QB, there is such a benefit, there is such a payoff. And you're as with the Chiefs did with Mahomes, you go from a team that's 10-6 plus or minus a win to a team that's fighting for the Super Bowl in 1 year, right? So the Jets go from a team with no hope to a team like who's might be one of the next great teams with Arnold now, right? Like it just changes the complexion of your franchise. And as you said, there's limitations on the price, but there's rarely a price that I wouldn't take to move up and get those QBs.
You know where I think fans lose at 2 is, like, say the Niners at 2. Let's say they decided.
It's a personal attack.
Yeah, let's say they had a shot at Kyler Murray. The thing that you feel like you're passing up is Nick Bosa, right? I think part of it is the overweighing of what the value is of all these top players. I think Nick Bosa is great. I think Quinnen Williams is great. Every time we even suggest a team who might already have a quarterback, say the Raiders taking Kyler and having him and Carr and all that stuff, well, what if you leave Quinnen on the table? What if you left Bosa on the table? But they're not making nearly the impact that the difference between average QB to great QBs making. Now, the difference there might be tough to get to, but it's one of those, it's worth the risk. The payoff is just so great.
I mean, it's a perfect point because I am the biggest Jimmy G fan and supporter you'll find. But if Kyler Murray's sitting there at 2, you absolutely have to take him. That is the smartest move. And just look at last season, right? So Aaron Donald was fantastic. Probably the best football player in the NFL. But he's worth a fourth of the wins above replacement that Pat Mahomes is. He's worth full win less than Baker Mayfield. Actually, more than a full win less than Baker Mayfield is. that quarterback being a top 10 quarterback is just, it's simply too
And
valuable.
Mayfield's QB 8 to 10,
And,
right?
and he dealt
in value.
And he dealt with what you might argue is like a nightmare situation. Not quite Rosen-esque, but
Not all attributed to him, but I mean, Cleveland has 7-win difference between the season before. Like that's, whereas Cincinnati or some of the Daltons, the Raiders, it was slow and it was like, more attributable to other things. With Mayfield, they had all these picks for all these years and they finally got a quarterback and that was the difference.
And it's all about positional value too, right? I mean, quarterback, cornerback, right?
Yep.
Are we then at pass rusher or
Receiver, pass rusher.
receiver, pass rusher? So everything
It's all
that
passing.
impacts the passing game.
game.
Yep.
Does safety fit into that after that?
I think safety,
Tight ends?
O-line, tight end are
So
kind of
anything to do with the passing game is at the upper end of the scale.
The
Anything to do with the
trickiest-
running game is the low end.
The trickiest part of that is those are also the hardest things to predict year to year. Other than QB plays pretty stable. QB output of production, I think, is a little bit dependent on everything around. But
So we're into team building around here. We've got everything covered: salary cap, war. We got the whole thing. We just don't have a team. We're just $2.3 billion short of.
you
building every
used to
team.
play receiver. He can throw. I think we're four members of a team right here.
right here.
you're a blocking tight end.
I was a blocking tight end in college. Yeah.
I've seen my boys out there playing flag this doesn't look good.
I like to think we're building all 32 teams though, because we're already working hand in hand with them. They're just scratching the surface on
the math. On our two mathematicians, that's right.
They're just understanding our grades. Now we're working the mathematical component. I mean, we've been at this for about a year, like really getting after it properly and putting numbers where they belong, putting value where it belongs. So we're just scratching the surface. I think we have 32 team clients, just a matter of how much they want to listen to the smart guys.
So we don't have a team, we have 32 teams.
That's how I look at it.
I like that. That's good.
The glass is 32 times full.
Jesus.
All right, that's enough.